Welcome to Plastosphere, the podcast on plastics, people, and the planet, with a little update on the state of plastics treaty negotiations here on what day is it?
Who knows? I've lost track. But it's the second to last day, and I think that's the thing that matters the most.
I think so too. With Neil Tangri of Gaia and University of Berkeley, right?
University of California, Berkeley, yes.
Neil, you've been an observer to these negotiations for a long time. This is the second part of the final part of these negotiations, and we're almost at the end. So where do we stand now?
Well, where we should stand is that we have a text that most of the countries agreed to, that we're almost ready to get through. In fact, what we have is a completely unworkable text, that there are still huge gaps between the majority of countries that want a really ambitious, effective treaty and a few countries that are standing in the way and really want nothing at all. And there's no clear pathway out of that. And so with 24 to 36 hours, maybe 48 hours if we go through the night left in the negotiations, clearly doing the same thing over and over again is not going to get us there. And so the chair has said that he is preparing his own text, and he is consulting with about 30 countries on the preparation of that text. And obviously those are going to be the 30 countries that he considers the most significant, right? So this is where the geopolitics really comes in. I imagine that of the 56 African countries here, at most one would be included in that group, right? It's going to be the US, even though the US will never ratify. It's going to be Saudi Arabia. It's going to be Russia. It's going to be China. Obviously the European Union. But the PCIDs, who are perhaps the most affected by the plastic pollution issue, I very much doubt they have a seat at that table. So all of the concerns that we have about a non-democratic process are going to be amplified and intensified. And that text is going to be presented in plenary, at which point we won't have any more time to negotiate it. So it's going to be a take it or leave it. And looking at who the countries are that are at the table, we know that that text is going to be very, very weak. Probably an empty text, like no significant provisions. Maybe there will be some concession on a couple of articles, but certainly nothing ambitious. And then, if the ambitious countries, the Africa group, the PCIDs, the Latin American ambitious countries stand up and say, no, this is not what we negotiated for. We've been here for 3 years demanding a treaty that actually solves the problem. They will be the ones who are blamed for the failure of the negotiations. So the chair is setting up a trap tomorrow, and it is the Copenhagen playbook. It says, thank you for your negotiations over the last 3 years. That's lovely. We're going to throw those in the bin now. I'm going to present the text, and you take it or leave it. And the entire global south basically is going to be told, take it or suffer.
That's crazy. I mean, that would mean that this entire process, as carbon intensive and as expensive it was basically just like how do you call it, like a Potemkin village, like just a facade and of participation. And in the end, we get something presented at last minute, and it's heavily influenced by the like-minded group and the countries that don't really want a strong treaty, don't really want a treaty that tackles plastic pollution across the full life cycle from production through consumption to the end of life. And they probably really only going to do some weak, non-binding measures on waste management, right?
Exactly. That's what we're looking at, is potentially some pretty language around other things. Some very light obligations, probably non-binding, around waste management. And, I can't predict what's going to be in that text, but the like-minded group has made quite clear that it is opposed, and it considers a red line, any control on production of plastic. And of course, that is the only way to really solve the plastic problem, is to control production.
Some of the observers here I spoke to said that we'd be happy if we get a treaty that maybe starts out weaker than we would want it to be, but that leaves the option to be strengthened and become more ambitious over time. So what do you think about that? Do you think that'll be included, or will it be a treaty that then basically it locks us up into like a weak plan?
I think that's very unlikely. For that to work, first of all, we would need voting in the treaty itself, that is in the COPs. Once we have the treaty ratified and the treaty meets every year or two, we would need to be able to vote in those spaces in order to get stronger provisions. And that is one thing that, again, Saudi Arabia and the other like-minded group, plus China, plus India, have said that they're absolutely against. They want consensus, not voting. And that effectively gives them a veto over any stronger provisions. And if we look at the history of treaties, like the Basel Convention, the Stockholm Convention, they're not getting stronger over time. So maybe the Basel Convention, you can argue it did get stronger with the Basel ban, but it has been a very long, slow process to bring that along. And notably, the Basel Convention got stronger because the US is not a party to it, right? So a treaty that is weak enough to bring in all of these naysayer countries, like the United States, will also be a treaty that is too weak to be strengthened over time.
So it's not looking good, and we're running out of time, despite the fact that there's no time to waste. And unfortunately, we're also running out of battery here. So let's get to the good part of it. Like, you just published a blog on Medium where you argued that there is a way out for the ambitious countries. So tell us what that is about.
Yeah, UNEP is not the only game in town. This has been a very important process for raising the profile of the issue, raising the expertise of many countries and many environment ministries around the world, really galvanizing a lot of support around this issue. But we are not trapped by the UNEP rules of procedure. Countries can choose to take this outside of UNEP. A lot of people have been talking about an Ottawa process, which is where on the Landmines Treaty, Canada convened countries that it knew wanted a treaty, and without the countries that were spoilers at the table. And in 1 week, they wrote the treaty. And now we have a Landmines Treaty. And over time, that treaty, it has not strengthened, but it has grown because more and more countries have been added to it. So rather than the start weak and strengthen over time, it starts strong and grow over time. And so it's a different approach. That's one possibility. Taking it to the UN General Assembly, where voting is common, is another possibility. Regional agreements are another possibility. So there are other avenues. This is not the only game in town.
Thank you so much, Neil, for updating us on the state of things, and also for this outlook of how we could tackle this if this fails. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.